If Arlena disappeared, who'd pay Mom's heating bill? That's what my sister said after Thanksgiving dinner, laughing, clinking glasses, like it was just another harmless joke. No one noticed I was in the kitchen. No one ever really noticed. I bought pies, helped with the dishes, and remembered birthdays. They brought silence. And when I stopped paying, stopped showing up the way they expected, suddenly I wasn't just invisible. I was a threat. If you've ever been the one who always showed up, only to be overlooked, drop a 1 in the comments. If you've always been the favorite, the one they praised, drop a 0 and count yourself lucky. Because sometimes, the moment you stop giving is the first time they start noticing. So I stopped smiling out of habit and started remembering. Remembering everything they thought I'd forget. I always brought a dish and a smile, one baked from scratch, the other reheated from obligation. The tart had just cooled on the windowsill, steam still ghosting the air above its sugar-crusted shell. I brushed a flake of pecan off the edge and pressed my thumb to the corner where the cranberry filling peeked through. The recipe card taped to the fridge fluttered slightly in the breeze from the heater. Dad's handwriting in thick, fading ink. Don't overdo the nutmeg, sweetheart. Outside, the wind tugged the last oak leaves into spinning spirals. It was 43 degrees and bone sharp, the kind of cold that made Rockwell, Ohio, feel older, more brittle. Thanksgiving was a week away, but the season had already stolen the green from the trees and replaced it with gray. I wrapped the tart, wiped my hands, and packed my smile. It had to hold. Before I left, I lingered at the mantel, where a photo of Dad smiled back from beneath a snow globe we never shook anymore. Next to it sat the old ceramic dish set we only used on holidays. One chipped plate carefully glued back together years ago. His favorite. I remembered how he used to lift a slice of my tart with a dramatic, and pretend it was too good for the rest of the family. Just mine, he'd wink. I missed that silliness, the way he made a crowded room feel like it belonged to you. Trina's house was immaculate, as always. The front porch was lined with lanterns glowing gently in the dusk, and through the frosted windows, I could hear Hall and Oates playing something nostalgic. Too crisp, too curated. As I stepped inside, warmth hit me like a wall. Cinnamon candles, lemon ginger, and the sterile sheen of a freshly cleaned floor. I offered my tart, and was met with a chorus of, "Oh, Arlena, you always outdo yourself." But no one asked how I was. Trina floated between the guests, hair glossy, teeth brighter than the chandelier. She cracked jokes that landed like little darts, sharp but sugar-coated. Her laugh was loud enough to command the room, her presence calibrated like a show hostess. I hovered near the kitchen doorway, adjusting the plate, noting how Eleanor, Mom, kept folding napkins into triangles, exactly like Dad used to insist. She hadn't smiled once. "Dina's bringing wine," Trina announced, clapping. "Let's hope it's not another box set from CVS." Dina arrived late, lipstick too red, voice too bright. She pulled me into a hug that smelled of vanilla body spray and left behind glitter. "Still bringing the tart, huh?" she said with a wink. "Traditionalist." It stung more than it should have. Dinner unfolded like a theater. We passed plates, exchanged polite stories. I offered to clear the table halfway through, slipping into the kitchen with practiced ease. Trina leaned toward me as I picked up her plate. "You just can't help yourself, huh?" she said with a grin. The table laughed. I smiled too, tightly, my stomach nodding. In the kitchen, I rinsed plates and stacked them on the counter. The sound of clinking ceramic echoed softly under the music playing in the living room. I could still hum along to the lyrics, songs from Dad's collection that Trina had lifted after the funeral. She'd digitized them, called it preservation, though I never heard her listen to them except for show. As I moved to collect the serving spoons, Eleanor came in, drying her hands. She glanced at me without speaking, then adjusted the towel on the rack to hang evenly. I waited for a word, even a sigh. Nothing, just her gaze resting briefly on the tart, then away again. It said more than any sentence. She finally murmured, "You always use too much nutmeg." I almost laughed. Almost. The kitchen was warm, the smell of roasted vegetables and gravy clinging to the air. As I stacked dishes, I heard footsteps, and then Trina's voice, quiet, but not enough. "If Arlena disappeared," she said to Dina, "who'd pay Mom's heating bill?" They laughed. I froze behind the swinging door. The plate in my hand trembled just slightly. My face burned, though no one had seen me. Or maybe they had, and that was the point. I waited until the laughter drifted into another room. Then I stepped out, smoothing my sweater, picking up a fresh bread roll from the basket. I sat back down, smiled, took a bite of bread, but something inside me had cracked. It wasn't snooping, it was muscle memory. And maybe, finally, divine timing. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemon ginger and hot wax, the kind that clung to potpourri jars and holiday candles Trina bought in bulk. I just finished rinsing cranberry tart crumbs from my fingertips when I spotted the iPad, face down but blinking with unread notifications. I never meant to touch it, but something in me, it bypassed permission and slid the device toward me with a well-practiced swipe. Trina often asked me to fix tech issues, and I'd long ago registered my fingerprint on Mom's devices. Maybe she never removed it because she forgot. Or maybe she never meant to. The screen lit up with a soft hum, and there, bold and unassuming, hovered a notification bubble like any other. "Doormat Club, 4 new messages." It could have meant anything, a joke group chat, a typo. But the second the screen unlocked, the truth unfolded in blinking, brutal clarity. My name, Arlena, sprinkled through messages like seasoning on a roast, frequent, deliberate, meant to pierce. "She'll pay, she always does." "Venmo Fairy strikes again." "Just smile and pass the stuffing, St. Arlena," I scrolled. Slowly. The air in the kitchen was suddenly too thick, like the scented wax was melting straight into my lungs. A new message slid in while I stood frozen. This one was from Eleanor. "She's convenient, not family." I read it twice, 3 times. The same fingers that had once braided my hair, clipped birthday cards with coupons tucked inside, now typed those words. There was no typo, no misunderstanding, just truth, the kind you never ask for and can't unread. Have you ever been the one who always showed up, only to learn they never saw you as family? If you've ever had to swallow a truth you wish you never knew, leave a comment number 2 below. Now, let's keep going. In the background, laughter erupted. Dina's shrill cackle, Trina's fake gasp. I heard Kennedy giggling too, distracted by her phone, blissfully oblivious. And through the wide kitchen arch, I caught Eleanor polishing a wine glass with slow, careful circles. Her eyes drifted my way, just a flicker. Did she know? Did she remember I had access? Or was her glance just a habit, like mine had been? Suggest? On the locked screen behind the messages, I had seen the wallpaper, a faded photo from when I was 11. Me and Dad, elbow deep in flour, his hand steadying mine as I poured vanilla into the mixer. That same image had lived on our fridge for years before Trina decluttered. It still lived in this device, hidden beneath snark and betrayal. The radio in the living room switched tracks. Private Eyes by Hall and Oates filtered in, light and bouncy, tone-deaf to my imploding chest. I let out a bitter chuckle. The timing was cruelly poetic. I didn't cry. Not then. Tears would have been too generous a response. Instead, I pressed the home button, watched the hateful chat vanish behind childhood pixels, and set the iPad back exactly where it had been. A dish shifted in the sink behind me. Someone else had entered the kitchen. I straightened my spine, adjusted the dish towel, and turned toward the dining room. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. That night, back home, the quiet felt surgical. The click of the kettle, the sigh of the old radiator, even the clink of my spoon in the teacup, all too precise. I sipped chamomile, the kind Eleanor used to swear calmed her nerves before a hard conversation. I let it steep longer than I should have. It tasted bitter. I pulled out the old folder from my bedroom closet. Family records. Originally filled with tax forms and emergency contacts, it had slowly become my personal ledger. I opened a fresh page and wrote at the top in deliberate block letters, "Expenses covered by Arlena." One by one, I began to list them. Monthly heating bills, Mom's new glasses, Trina's patio heater for last Christmas, Dina's fundraiser deposit, Eleanor's copay last March. I dated each one, added notes, attached receipts where I could. Not for revenge, for remembering. That night, when I got home, I made myself some chamomile tea. Then I opened my family records folder. I wrote down every expense I had made and who paid for it. They called me dramatic, but drama needs noise. What I did was silence. I started with the gas bill. For years, I'd paid it like clockwork, Mom's furnace clicking to life each winter. A silent nod to her comfort, my sacrifice. The automatic withdrawal was so seamless I barely noticed anymore. But that morning, I logged into the account, hovered over the setting, and clicked Cancel Autopay. It didn't feel defiant. It felt clean. Next was Dina's dental plan, an add-on I'd agreed to when she said her employer didn't cover root canals. I remembered her laughing, calling me her financial fairy godmother. I didn't laugh back then. I certainly wasn't laughing now. 2 clicks. Remove users. Confirm. Trina's secondary card took more effort. I'd forgotten I even gave her one. Years ago when she was balancing home repairs and daycare, back when I still believed family meant safety nets. The charges were small: Starbucks runs, wine delivery, the occasional Amazon splurge, but they stacked like guilt. Cancel card. Issue new. It wasn't rage, it was a ritual. A quiet serving, as methodical as folding laundry. Dad once told me, silence is still an answer, and often the right one. Back then, I thought he meant walking away from fights. Now I understood he meant walking away from people who only came close when you bled. By noon, my kitchen table was a mosaic of paperwork. Financial statements, folder tabs, legal pads with notes in red ink. I barely registered time until the sun dipped low and the air turned blue-gray. The scent of strong tea filled the apartment. I hadn't realized I'd made any. At 2 p.m., I stepped into Haskins and Feldman, attorneys at law. The building still smelled like paperbacks and leather, nostalgic, comforting. Mr. Haskins hadn't aged a day. Same pressed wool suit, same tortoiseshell glasses low on his nose. He greeted me with a soft smile and an envelope already in hand. "Your father left this. Told me to wait until you came on your own, not before." His voice was slow and clear. I nodded. Saturday opened the envelope. Inside, a letter, written in Dad's angular script, and a notarized supplement to his will. The letter was brief, no melodrama, no pleas. Just, "If you're reading this, it means you finally chose yourself." Good. I never worried about your heart, only your boundaries. The Geneva property is yours, along with the trust, but only if you walk away, completely. Let them write their stories. Live yours. The legal document confirmed it. Transfer of ownership of Geneva's cottage, the land it sat on, and the associated inheritance, all contingent on my withdrawal from the family trust's obligations. It wasn't punishment. It was permission. Geneva's house stood quiet when I arrived, windows dusty, porch creaking under my boots. The air smelled like cedar and something faintly sweet, maybe old perfume trapped in the drapes. I'd always loved this house. Geneva wasn't blood, but she was family. The kind you chose. The kind who chose back. I wandered the hallway, fingertips grazing the floral wallpaper, the handrail smoothed by decades. In her study, the desk sat untouched. I opened the side drawer without thinking, and there it was. Her ledger. Tidy handwriting. Exact dollar amounts. Every entry meticulous. And at the bottom of the last page, Arlena always showed up. I didn't cry out of pain. I cried out of being seen. The sob caught in my throat, not jagged, but round. Whole. Like something finally landing in place. The notary came the next day. I signed the deed with hands that didn't shake. For once, my name inked onto something that couldn't be taken, mocked, or erased. Property, autonomy, peace. The day after, my phone lit up. Sunday brunch. Your favorite waffles. Come. Trina. I stared at it for a full minute. Then I tapped, yes. Quietly walked to the printer, slid in my USB, and printed every line from my new ledger. Dollar by dollar, month by month. A decade of unthanked devotion. Text from Trina. Sunday brunch. Your favorite waffles. Come. I pressed yes and printed out the entire list. They toasted with mimosas. I raised my glass too, full of silence, spiked with numbers. I arrived 5 minutes early, which meant I stood alone in the driveway for 2 of them, hands stuffed in my coat pockets, watching the gray clouds drift like unsaid things across the Ohio sky. I had worn navy, sharp enough to look serious, soft enough to feel familial. The manila folder was tucked under my arm, like a bouquet I didn't want to offer. Trina opened the door with her usual flair, red lipstick, and perfectly curled hair, like she was hosting a magazine brunch shoot, not a family meal. You made it, she sang, stepping aside. I said I would, I replied. Nothing more. The house smelled like maple syrup and citrus peel. Bacon sizzled somewhere behind her, and the waffle iron steamed on the counter. The table was already set. White linens, silver-edged plates, cloth napkins folded into triangles, too perfect to touch. Eleanor stood at the far end, adjusting the sugar bowl by a millimeter, then retreating to the corner like a curator of still life. Dina was already seated, tapping her perfectly manicured nails against the rim of her mimosa glass. The rhythm was fast, like a heart trying not to panic. Come, Trina said brightly, motioning toward my seat. We're celebrating. Just a casual family thing. Old times, good food. Her smile twitched at the corners, like it didn't quite believe itself. I set my folder down on the table before sitting. No fanfare, no apology. The conversation floated around me. Something about Kennedy's school play, a neighbor's new lawn ornaments, how Eleanor had found a great deal on bone broth. All so controlled. Every word ironed flat. Trina raised her glass. To us. For always sticking together, no matter what. They clinked. I did too. Quietly. Then I opened the folder. The papers made a soft rustling sound, almost tender, like old leaves in November. I lifted the first page and placed it gently between my bread plate and my coffee. Venmo transactions dating back 8 years. Next came utility bills, gas, electric, even Trina's subscription TV, which had somehow found its way onto my auto pay. Co-pays, dentist invoices, school field trip deposits, a summer camp I never visited but apparently sponsored. Each line was printed, highlighted, totaled. I'd used a calm font, Arial, size 11, because anger didn't need to shout. Trina blinked. Arlena, what is this? I flipped the next page. Dina leaned forward, her face blanching. Wait, is that mine? Eleanor set her fork down with surgical precision. This is not the time. I looked at her then, really looked. It never was. That's how you kept it all tidy. Silence fell like a sheet being pulled over the room. Even the ticking clock above the mantel seemed louder. I'm not accusing, I said, voice steady. I'm documenting. Trina laughed, sharp and brittle. So what? You want reimbursement? A medal? No, I said. I just want the truth. Because it turns out, silence doesn't protect people. It erases them. Have you ever stayed quiet to keep the peace until you realized your silence was costing you everything? If you know that feeling, leave a comment number 4 below. Let's see what happened after that. She cut her waffle with precision, syrup pooling into the crevices. Her knife made short, neat motions, as if conquering the plate was more important than facing me. I glanced at Eleanor. She was watching Trina, not me. I stood slowly, collecting each sheet and tucking them back into the folder. I hadn't meant to cause a scene. I'd meant to cause a shift. Trina whispered then, just loud enough for the room to hold its breath. You won't get away with this. I met her eyes, steady, honest. I'm not trying to get away. I'm trying to get free. And I walked out, the sound of my boots muffled by the pristine rug. The flames came quietly, like everything else in my family. No explosion, just ruin. The first thing I noticed wasn't the smell. It was the silence, the kind that feels too still, like a room holding its breath. When I opened the door to my apartment that Monday morning, the scent hit me second. Not smoke, not quite. Something duller, sadder. Like the afterthought of fire. Inside, the living room looked like someone had tried to erase me. The couch was torn open, cushions gutted like fish. My bookshelf, once neat rows of cookbooks, memoirs, and framed photos, was half collapsed. And on the floor, charred paper fragments, curling at the edges, some still warm. A corner of a gas bill. A melted plastic folder. The photo of Dad and me by the old apple tree. His face gone, mine half there. I didn't cry. I just stood there, letting the weight of it stack on my shoulders, brick by invisible brick. The police came an hour later. 2 officers. Professional, polite, efficient. One took notes. The other peered around like he was scanning a rental listing. No signs of forced entry, the younger one said, glancing at the frame of the front door. I gestured toward the burn marks on my table. Doesn't that count as a sign? He shrugged. Could be accidental. We'll file a report, ma'am, but without evidence. Of course. That afternoon, a courier slid an envelope under my door. Trina's name is embossed on the top corner. Inside, a letter from her lawyer citing defamation and reputational harm caused by my publicly distributed accusations. I stared at the wording, clinical, cold. The lawsuit wasn't about money. It was about silencing me. I thought about Geneva then. About the time she told me, after I got passed over for a promotion. Sometimes people punish you for doing what they never had the courage to try. That night, I sat in Mr. Haskins' office again, hands still smudged with ash. He didn't say much, just slid a folder across the desk. I kept a copy, the original. Thought you might need it someday. His office smelled like old paper and lemon polish. A brass lamp glowed in the corner, casting shadows over the heavy bookshelves. Mr. Haskins folded his hands and looked at me the way my father used to, with patient weight. Inside the folder, Dad's will, signed in thick ink. A second page, dated a month later, had Geneva's signature too. It wasn't about money this time. It was the message scribbled in Dad's handwriting at the bottom. For Arlena, who stood alone when others sat together. My fingers lingered on the ink, still bold despite the years. I looked up. Why didn't you show me this before? Mr. Haskins hesitated. Your father asked me to wait. Said you'd come for it when you were ready, not just angry, and now you are. And Trina? I asked quietly. I suspect she knew about this version, or guessed. That might explain the rest. Outside, the sky was gray, spitting drizzle. I clutched the folder like a lifeline as I walked home. When I got back, I took a long shower, watching ash circle the drain. Then I sat at the old wooden table I'd salvaged from Geneva's, still scratched, still sturdy. I lit the candle she left in the drawer, lavender and sage. The flame flickered, soft and low, nothing like the one that gutted my living room. I pulled out the fountain pen Dad used to sign every birthday card, filled it with ink that bled slightly at the edges. The paper beneath it was thick, absorbent, too good for grocery lists. I stared at the blank page. The silence around me wasn't hollow. It felt earned. And then I wrote, Some families pass down recipes. Mine passed down in silence. I broke the chain. The words sat there, solid. Behind me, I felt it. A presence. No wind, no creak. Just a sense that someone stood steady, unseen, as if his chair had never truly been empty. I remembered being 8, sitting at the kitchen table, trying to glue back together a porcelain mug I'd dropped. My dad had walked in, crouched beside me, and said, You can fix it, but the crack will always be there. And maybe that's the point. It still holds. He didn't punish me. He didn't even seem angry. He just ruffled my hair and handed me a marker to draw flowers over the fracture. Now, decades later, I felt that same hand, steady, invisible, on my shoulder. I didn't look back. I just kept writing. The storm passed, not because they apologized, but because I stopped waiting. The air in Geneva's house had a kind of hush to it, like even the walls knew they could breathe now. I'd opened every window, not for the breeze, but for letting go. Light spilled onto the hardwood floors like forgiveness I didn't ask for. The cat, gray, ragged, and self-possessed, curled on the back step in a square of sun, unconcerned by anything that didn't come in a can. It had taken weeks to unpack fully. Some boxes I never opened, choosing instead to label them someday and shove them into the attic. The house smelled like lemon oil and old paper, and I'd started to like the creak in the floor near the kitchen, like the house was learning to stretch again after too many years of standing still. I watered the rosemary bush with Geneva's old silver can. It dripped a little at the spout, always had. I'd never gotten around to fixing it, and now I didn't feel like I had to. The herb had grown tall, wild, fragrant, alive not because it had been trimmed, but because it had been left alone long enough. The backyard had changed too. I'd cleared a corner where the ivy used to be and put it on a bench. Geneva's bench, still scuffed, still solid. I'd sit there in the mornings with a mug of tea, tracing the grain in the wood with my fingers, remembering how she used to say, Some people are carved, not built. Inside, the kettle clicked off. I poured myself a glass of iced tea and sat by the open window, legs tucked beneath me, listening, Not for anyone, but to everything. Leaves rustling, a car door in the distance, my own steady breath. The quiet wasn't empty. It was mine. My phone buzzed. Mark, FaceTime. He appeared on the screen, looking awkward as ever, hair still too long in the front. Hey, are you good? I turned the phone so he could see the house behind me. He whistled. You look lighter. Maybe I am. I should have said this sooner, he said. But whatever you need, I mean it. I looked at him for a long second, saw the tiredness around his eyes, the guilt he hadn't put into words. You always kept out of it, I said softly. I used to think that meant you didn't care. His mouth twitched. I didn't know what to do, but I care. Always did. That cracked something open in me, not in a painful way, but like a locked drawer finally sliding free. We didn't say much after that. We didn't need to. Later that afternoon, I opened the small wooden box Geneva had kept in the cabinet above the fridge. Inside was a letter from Dad. Not long. Just enough. You were never soft. You were solid. I didn't cry. I just closed the letter and put it back where it belonged, between a stack of unpaid bills and a recipe for lemon pound cake. An email popped up on my laptop. A publication wanted to feature my essay, Doormat No More, in their next issue. They called it raw and vital. I called it overdue. There was also a voicemail from Trina. I saw what you wrote. I didn't know you felt that way. Yeah. Then nothing. The message cut off, like she ran out of breath or nerve or both. I didn't call back, but I wrote a postcard to Eleanor. I'm okay. You don't have to reply. I didn't expect a response, but I left the mailbox lid open for a few seconds longer than usual, just in case. The next week, I stood behind a podium at the Women and Boundaries conference. I had on a blue blouse I hadn't worn in years. The one Geneva once said made me look like I knew what mattered. My voice didn't shake. I stopped being the family glue, I said, and I became the spine I needed. People clapped. Not a thunderous ovation, just enough. I bowed slightly and walked off stage with my shoes clicking against the linoleum, a sound that said I was here, still standing. In the lobby, a woman in her 60s took my hand. I wish I'd heard this 20 years ago, she whispered. Her grip was strong, like she was borrowing courage through contact. On my way out, I passed the vendor tables. A modest booth caught my eye. Local prints, journals, and a stack of quarterly magazines. On the cover of one, my name, in bold serif type, just above the title, Doormat No More. A woman, maybe in her 70s, picked it up and looked at me, then the magazine. Did you really write this? She asked. I smiled and said, yes. And I lived it too. That evening, I brewed another pot of tea. The sun was dipping low, turning the backyard gold. I took Geneva's watering can and gave the rosemary one last sip. The cat yawned and rolled onto her back, exposing a soft belly no one dared touch. I sat on the bench and opened the little leather-bound notebook I kept now, half journal, half map. I wrote down a line from Geneva I'd been hearing in my head all day. There are some victories no one claps for, but they're the ones that last. Then I closed the book, leaned back, and let the quiet settle in like a guest I'd finally learned how to welcome. Sometimes I still walk through the house expecting echoes of old voices, but all I hear now is peace, and it's enough. I've come to believe that not every truth needs to be shouted to be real, and not every ending requires applause to be meaningful. Family, I've learned, isn't always where you come from. It's what you choose to nurture, even if it's just your own quiet heart. If my story stayed with you, consider subscribing. there's always more to share, softly and truthfully. Thank you for listening. See you in the next story.